Most people believe respect is something you must show. You explain yourself clearly. You defend your position. You speak at the right moment, with the right tone, using the right words. And when respect does not come, you assume you did not speak well enough. But Confucian thought saw the problem differently. Respect is rarely lost because of what you say. It is lost because of what your presence communicates before you ever speak. Modern adults often feel this tension. You enter a room, you sit in a meeting, you join a conversation, and without saying anything yet, you already feel the pressure to prove something, to justify your place, to signal competence, to establish authority through words. This is exhausting, and it rarely works because respect does not begin at the level of speech. It begins at the level of bearing. Confucian scholars understood that people respond first to what feels stable, composed, and grounded, not to clever arguments. When your inner state is unsettled, your words carry urgency. When your identity is defensive, your explanations feel excessive. When your posture is tense, your authority leaks away before a sentence is finished. This is why some people can speak very little and still command attention, and why others can explain endlessly and still feel unseen. The issue is not confidence. It is alignment between character, conduct, and presence. In Confucian cultivation, respect was never demanded. It was generated, quietly, gradually, without display. There is a way of standing, listening, and responding that signals reliability before any words are used. And once this signal is present, speech becomes optional. Before we talk about how this works, you must first see why trying to earn respect through words almost always produces the opposite effect. That is what we uncover next. The harder you try to earn respect through explanation, the more it slips. Long justifications create doubt. Over-clarifying creates imbalance. Defending yourself invites silent judgment. People may listen, but they stop feeling your authority. Confucian thinkers noticed this pattern early. They saw that respect weakens the moment it is chased, not through arrogance, but through effort that reveals insecurity. When someone speaks too quickly, it signals inner urgency. When someone explains too much, it suggests uncertainty. When someone reacts immediately, it shows they are being moved rather than doing the moving. None of this is intentional. It happens when the inner state leans outward for validation. Confucian cultivation worked in the opposite direction. Instead of sharpening speech, it stabilized conduct. Instead of projecting authority, it refined self-command. When the self is settled, words slow down. When intention is clear, silence gains weight. This is why the Confucian gentleman was described as measured, not quiet for the sake of quiet, but composed in a way that did not rush to fill space. Others sensed this composure immediately. They adjusted their tone. They listened more closely. They felt less need to challenge. Respect formed without being asked for. To understand how this works, we must look at the Confucian principle that governs presence itself and why restraint, not expression, is what gives words their power. In the state of Lu, there was a minor official. A few people noticed at first. He held no impressive title. He did not speak often in council. He never argued his position. When debates grew heated, others raised their voices. They quoted texts. They defended their ideas forcefully. The room was filled with words. The quiet official remained still. He listened without interruption. His posture did not shift. His expression did not harden. When the ruler finally turned to him and asked for his view, he spoke only a few sentences. No rhetoric, no persuasion. Yet the room settled. Arguments stopped mid-thought. Even those who disagreed found themselves listening carefully. After the meeting, a younger clerk asked him, "Why does everyone listen to you when you say so little?" The official answered calmly, "I do not enter the room to win." The clerk did not understand. The official continued, "When a man enters to win, he has already placed himself below the room." He explained nothing further. Over time, others began to notice something. Before the official arrived, conversations were scattered. After he sat down, people spoke more carefully. They chose words with more restraint. They interrupted less. Nothing about the official had changed. What changed was the field around him. Confucian scholars use this story to illustrate a simple truth. Authority does not come from asserting oneself. It comes from being centered before engagement begins. When a person's inner conduct is settled, others feel no need to test it. Respect forms not from what is said, but from what does not need to be said. This is not passivity, it is containment, and it is the foundation of the Confucian way of earning respect. From this point, the lesson turns inward. The official did not manage others. He managed his own state. He did not try to control the room. He allowed the room to adjust to him. This is the Confucian distinction most people miss. Respect is not created in interaction. It is decided before interaction begins. Long before words are exchanged, people sense whether someone is settled or seeking, contained or performing, anchored or reaching. When a person enters already centered, nothing needs to be proved. Silence feels natural. Speech feels deliberate. Timing replaces volume. This is why Confucian cultivation focused first on self-command, not charisma, not persuasion, not rhetorical skill. Self-command meant holding one's conduct steady regardless of the room. No rushing to respond, no tightening under challenge, no softening under approval. From that steadiness, presence gains weight. Others slow down without being told. Challenges soften without being confronted. Respect forms without negotiation. The official's power did not come from silence itself. It came from the discipline that made silence unnecessary. This is the principle we turn to next, how Confucian self-command is cultivated, and why restraint, not expression, is what gives authority its quiet force. Self-command begins long before a room is entered. It is shaped in ordinary moments, how one stands, how one listens, how one carries intention when nothing is at stake. Confucian training emphasized this daily shaping. Posture reflected inner order. Movement reflected restraint. Speech followed only when alignment was complete. This was not rigid, it was consistency. When conduct remains steady across situations, others sense reliability. They stop probing, they stop testing boundaries, they stop waiting for reactions. Authority emerges quietly as predictability without stiffness. From here, the path forward becomes clear. Respect grows not from adding presence, but from removing excess. Excess explanation, excess reaction, excess needs to be seen. The Confucian way teaches that what remains after removal is enough. That understanding opens the next step, learning how restraint shapes every interaction before a word is ever spoken. Confucian respect does not begin with speech. It begins with self-command. Before a word is spoken, the Confucian gentleman is already practicing restraint. Restraint of posture, restraint of reaction, restraint of intention. This is the core principle. Speech is never used to correct what conduct has not settled. In Confucian thought, words are an extension of inner order. If inner order is unstable, speech becomes compensation. If conduct is scattered, language tries to repair it. This is why speaking more often reduces authority, not through content, but through timing. The Confucian gentleman does not rush to respond. He allows the moment to complete itself. He listens until understanding is whole. He waits until emotion has passed. He speaks only when alignment is present. This waiting is not hesitation, it is containment. Containment signals confidence without assertion. Others feel it immediately. They sense that nothing needs to be pushed, nothing needs to be defended, nothing needs to be won. This is why restraint carries weight. In Confucian cultivation, self-command was trained through ritual and conduct. The ritual was not a performance, it was regulation. Standing correctly trained the body to settle. Moving deliberately trained with intention to slow. Observing form-trained emotions to remain measured. Over time, this regulation became natural. the person no longer tried to be composed. Composure became the default. From this state, silence gained authority, speech gained precision, and respect formed without instruction. This is why Confucius taught that moral force precedes language. When conduct is aligned, words are believed. When conduct is steady, silence is trusted. Modern life pulls in the opposite direction. Speed is rewarded. Reaction is praised. Visibility is mistaken for influence. People are trained to respond immediately, to fill silence quickly, to explain themselves before being asked. Under these conditions, self-command quietly erodes. Posture tightens without notice. Attention fragments. Speech arrives before intention has settled. Confidence is performed instead of embodied. This is why many people feel they must constantly assert themselves to maintain respect. The harder they try, the more unstable their presence feels. Confucian cultivation warned against this drift. When expression moves ahead of inner order, words lose gravity. When reaction replaces restraint, authority thins. What appears as confidence often reads as urgency. What appears as clarity often sounds like justification. The remedy is not silence for its own sake. It is a restoring sequence. First settle conduct, then allow presence to form. Only then let speech appear if needed. When this order is restored, something shifts in interaction. Others pause more. Interruptions decrease. Challenges soften, not through dominance, but through steadiness. This is where the Confucian way becomes practical rather than philosophical. And it leads directly to the next layer, how restraint functions in real, modern situations where pressure, hierarchy, and expectation are already in play. Pressure is where self-command is tested. Meetings move fast. Decisions feel urgent. Hierarchy is present even when unspoken. In these moments, most people abandon restraint without realizing it. They lean forward too quickly. They speak before the thought has settled. They fill silence to avoid being overlooked. This is not incompetence, it is conditioning. Modern environments reward immediacy. They punish pauses. They mistake calm for disengagement. So adults learn to signal relevance through constant response. Yet the effect is predictable. The more someone reacts, the less space they are given. The more they explain, the more they are questioned. The more they push to be heard, the more their words lose weight. Confucian cultivation prepared for exactly this situation. It trained people to remain composed when others became reactive, not aloof, not passive, grounded. Under pressure, the Confucian response is not withdrawal, it is containment. The body stays upright without rigidity. The face remains neutral without withdrawal. The breath stays even without control. Speech slows, not to appear thoughtful, but to allow alignment to complete. In modern settings, this creates a noticeable contrast. While others compete for attention, the composed person becomes a reference point. People look to them before making decisions. They wait for their reaction, even if it never comes. This is not a strategy. It is signal. A signal that says, nothing here needs to be rushed. Once this signal is present, respect stabilizes, not through authority granted by role, but through authority felt in presence. The conflict modern adults face is not a lack of skill. It is an inverted sequence. They try to manage outcomes before managing themselves. Confucian cultivation reverses this. Self-command first, interaction second, speech last. When this order is restored, pressure loses its power to destabilize, and this prepares the ground for the next challenge: what happens when restraint is mistaken for weakness, and how to respond without breaking composure. That misunderstanding appears sooner or later. Someone mistakes quiet for hesitation, someone tests boundaries, someone fills the space you leave open. This is where many people abandon restraint. They rush to correct the impression, they speak more sharply, they assert themselves to recover ground. In doing so, they give up the very signal that created respect in the first place. Confucian teaching anticipated this moment. Restraint was never meant to invite challenge, nor to avoid it. It was meant to hold under it. When restraint is genuine, it does not collapse when questioned. It remains steady. The body does not tighten. The voice does not rise. The words, if spoken, arrive measured and complete. Others sense the difference immediately. Testing stops when it finds no reaction to feed on. Challenges soften when they meet no defensiveness. Respect deepens when steadiness proves consistent. This is the quiet strength of self-command. Not silence as avoidance, but silence as stability. From here, the path moves inward again toward understanding how to maintain this composure over time without turning it into another performance. Maintaining this composure is less dramatic than people expect. No constant monitoring is required. No internal script needs to be rehearsed. The moment you start maintaining it, it turns into performance. Confucian cultivation avoided this trap by grounding restraint in habit, not vigilance. Self-command was trained until it no longer felt like control. Posture settled on its own. Speech slowed naturally. Reactions lost urgency. Over time, restraint stopped feeling like something you do and became something you are not doing. You are not rushing. You are not filling space. You are not proving relevance. This is why Confucian authority endured. It did not depend on mood. It did not fluctuate with confidence. It did not require reinforcement. Respect accumulated through consistency rather than display. When presence remains unchanged across calm moments and tense ones, others stop recalibrating around you. They know what to expect, and that predictability, quiet, steady, unreactive, is what turns respect from something temporary into something lasting. From here, the teaching reaches its final arc, how time, reputation, and legacy are shaped by this way of moving through the world without ever needing to announce it. Respect that comes from restraint does not announce itself, it accumulates, not in dramatic moments, but in small, repeatable ones. People begin to notice that you do not change under pressure, that your tone remains measured when others sharpen theirs, that your posture stays open when situations tighten. Over time, this consistency shapes reputation, not as popularity, not as authority granted by title, as reliability. Others stop watching for your reaction and start trusting your presence. They bring difficult matters to you first. They pause before speaking in your presence. They measure their own conduct more carefully. None of this is requested. It forms naturally when restraint outlasts impulse. Confucian thinkers understood that legacy is built this way, not through speeches remembered, but through conduct observed. Words fade, presence lingers. Years later, people may forget what you argued for, but they remember how you carried yourself. They remember that you did not rush to judgment, that you did not escalate conflict, that you did not need to dominate space. This is how respect survives time, not as reputation managed, but as trust accumulated. The Confucian way never aimed to control how others see you. It aimed to stabilize how you stand, regardless of who is watching. From that steadiness, everything else follows. The path does not end with influence. It ends with coherence. A life where conduct, presence, and restraint remain aligned long after words are no longer needed. With time, this coherence becomes visible without effort. You no longer think about earning respect. You simply notice that it is there. Conversations change pace around you. Disagreements soften sooner. Decisions take shape with less friction. Nothing about this feels dramatic. It feels inevitable. The need to assert fades. The urge to explain dissolves. Silence stops feeling empty. This is the quiet reward of restraint. Not admiration, not control. Stability. A form of presence that does not rise or fall with opinion or outcome. From here, the path forward is simple. Continue to stand as you stand. Continue to speak only when alignment is complete. Continue to let conduct carry what words do not need to. That is how respect lasts without ever being requested. Over time, this way of moving through the world stops feeling like a teaching. It becomes ordinary. You enter rooms without preparing a stance. You listen without planning a response. You speak without needing to secure a position. Others sense this ease. They stop pushing for reactions. They stop testing limits. They stop mistaking quiet for absence. Respect settles where effort used to be, not as something earned each day, but as something sustained through consistency of conduct. This is the Confucian ending. No declaration, no conclusion, only a life lived with fewer words and greater weight. And when speech does come, it arrives complete, already supported by everything that did not need to be said. At the deepest level, Confucian respect rests on one law. The self must be ordered before the world can respond. This ordering was never psychological. It was ethical and embodied. Confucian cultivation began with Li ritual conduct that shaped the body, regulated emotion, and clarified intentions. Standing correctly trained restraint. Waiting trained patience. Measured movement trained self-command. Over time, these forms stopped feeling formal. They became natural. The person no longer tried to be composed. Composition became the ground they stood on. This is why Confucius taught that governance begins with the self, not as an abstract idea, but as a practical sequence. When the self is regulated, the family stabilizes. When the family stabilizes, the community aligns. When the community aligns, order appears without coercion. The same law operates in a meeting room, in a conversation, in a moment of conflict. If the self is unsettled, no argument restores authority. If the self is aligned, authority precedes speech. Rectification does not mean suppression, it means congruence. Thought, posture, and intention move together. Nothing leaks outward as urgency. Nothing compensates through explanation. This congruence is felt immediately. Others sense that nothing needs to be extracted from you. Nothing needs to be defended against you. Nothing needs to be rushed around you. Respect follows as a response to order, not fear, not admiration, recognition. From here, the teaching returns to the beginning daily conduct, small moments, ordinary choices. This is where the Confucian way is lived, not in silence alone, but in speech that arrives only after the self has been set in order. And when the self is ordered, the world listens without being asked. From here, nothing needs to be added. The teaching does not expand, it settles. What remains is attention to the ordinary, how you stand when no one is watching, how you listen when nothing is at stake, how you respond when silence would be easier. These moments shape everything that follows, not through effort, but through repetition without strain. Respect continues to accumulate without calculation. You stop checking whether it is present. Others stop questioning whether it is deserved. The self stays ordered. The world adjusts. This is not an achievement. It is a condition maintained by returning to alignment again and again. When that return becomes natural, the Confucian way no longer feels like guidance. It feels like home. From that sense of home, nothing feels imposed. Conduct flows out of familiarity, not discipline. You recognize the moment when alignment wavers and return without tension. No correction is announced. No inner lecture is required. The body remembers the posture. The mind remembers the pace. Intention remembers where to settle. This is how order sustains itself, not through vigilance, but through ease of return. Daily life provides the training, waiting in line, listening to disagreement, pausing before response. Each ordinary moment becomes a place where the self is set in order again. Over time, this ordering leaves a trace, not as reputation crafted, but as steadiness perceived. Others feel less need to probe your position, less need to draw a reaction from you. Trust forms quietly where explanation once lived. This is the final rhythm of the Confucian way. Return, align, act when needed, remain when not. Nothing is held tightly. Nothing is pushed forward. And in that simplicity, respect continues to grow not as something earned, but as something that naturally follows a life lived in order. With time, the effect of this way of living becomes unmistakable. Not suddenly, not all at once. It appears in how situations resolve around you. Conflicts shorten, misunderstandings dissolve sooner, decisions land without excessive negotiation. People stop asking where you stand. They already sense it. This is how legacy forms in the Confucian sense, not as reputation carefully managed, but as trust quietly accumulated. Years pass, roles change, titles come and go, yet the signal remains. You are seen as steady, as fair, as someone who does not distort situations through reaction. This is why Confucian thought treated time as an ally. Short-term silence can be misunderstood. Long-term consistency cannot. Over time, restraint clarifies intent more clearly than explanation ever could. The path forward, then, is not strategic. It is faithful. Return to posture. Return to measured conduct. Return to speaking only when alignment is complete. Some days this feels effortless. Other days it requires restraint. Both are part of the same path. There is no final test, no moment of arrival, only continuity. A life where conduct leads, speech follows when needed, and respect grows without being pursued. This is the Confucian ending. Not an ending marked by words, but one marked by how little needs to be said for things to fall into order. Over time, this continuity stops drawing attention to itself. You no longer notice when restraint is chosen, it simply happens. Moments that once required preparation now pass without effort. Silence no longer feels like a risk. Speech no longer feels like a tool. Presence carries what language once tried to deliver. People respond to you before you respond to them, not through deference, but through ease. Interactions shorten. Tension dissipates earlier. Misunderstandings lose momentum. Nothing about this feels calculated. It feels lived. This is the final refinement of the Confucian path. Not mastery over others, but reliability within yourself. When conduct remains aligned across time, respect no longer needs reinforcement. It rests. And from that resting place, life unfolds with fewer words, less friction, and a quiet authority that does not need to be named. From that quiet authority, nothing more needs to be proven. You stop checking whether respect is present. Others stop testing whether it holds. The space around you settles without instruction. What once felt like discipline now feels like orientation. You know where to return when pressure appears. You recognize when words are unnecessary. You sense when alignment has arrived, and speech can follow without force. This is not withdrawal from the world. It is participation without strain. You still engage. You still decide. You still speak when needed. The difference lies in how little is required for things to move. The Confucian path does not end in silence. It ends in sufficiency. Enough presence, enough restraint, enough trust built through time, that explanation becomes optional. And when life grows loud again, as it always does, the return remains simple. Stand as you stand, act as you act. Let conduct speak first. This is where many people misunderstand Confucian restraint. They assume that earning respect without speaking requires becoming someone else, a calmer version, a more authoritative version, a version that never hesitates. But Confucian cultivation never asked for reinvention. It asked for refinement. Reinvention is loud. It demands performance. It replaces one image with another. Refinement is quiet. It removes what does not belong. The excess needs to be explained. The reflex to defend. The urge to secure position through words. In Confucian thought, identity was not something to display. It was something to stabilize. When identity is unsettled, speech tries to compensate. When identity is secure, speech becomes optional. This is why refinement matters. You do not stop being yourself. You stop adding strain to who you already are. The Confucian gentleman did not aim to appear respectable. He aimed to be reliable. Reliable in conduct, reliable in restraint, reliable in response. Over time, this reliability reshapes identity. You no longer ask, how should I come across? You begin asking, is my conduct aligned with my values right now? That question requires no audience. As refinement continues, identity loosens its grip. Not the roles you inhabit, but the tension behind them. You still disagree, you still decide, you still lead, but you no longer need to announce certainty. This is where respect deepens. Others sense that your position does not depend on validation. Silence feels natural, speech feels deliberate. Nothing is being hidden, nothing is being performed. This is why refinement lasts. It does not depend on confidence. It does not depend on recognition. It depends on alignment that can be returned to in every ordinary moment. From here, the path no longer asks who you are becoming. It asks something simpler, what no longer needs to be carried for respect to remain. That question leads naturally to the final movement of the Confucian path, how time, reputation, and legacy form around a self that no longer strains to be seen. Time answers that question quietly. What is no longer carried frees attention. What is no longer defended frees presence. Days begin to feel less negotiated. Interactions feel less loaded. You stop adjusting yourself to be read correctly. Others stop trying to read you closely. Respect settles where effort used to be. From this point, the path moves forward without a need to signal progress. Conduct remains steady. Speech arrives when alignment is complete. Silence holds when it is enough. Nothing new needs to be added. Only the return to refinement, again and again, as life changes shape around you. That is how the Confucian way continues, not as a technique to apply, but as a way of standing in the world that remains intact, long after words are no longer needed. What remains is continuity, not consistency forced, but steadiness returned. Moments of pressure still arise. Misunderstandings still appear. Silence is still tested. Each time, the same choice presents itself. Add explanation or hold alignment. React or remain composed. Nothing dramatic marks the correct choice. Yet over time, the pattern becomes visible. Conduct leads. Speech follows. Respect accumulates. This is not restraint as withdrawal. It is restraint as clarity. The self stands without tension. The world responds without resistance. From here, the teaching no longer unfolds in stages. It lives in the ordinary, in how you enter rooms, in how you wait, in how you speak only when needed. And through that ordinariness, a quiet authority endures. From that quiet authority, nothing needs to be resolved. Life continues to present moments that invite reaction. Some are subtle, some are sharp. Each one is met the same way, not with calculation, but with return. Return to posture, return to restraint, return to alignment before response. This return is not rigid. It adapts without bending inward. Over time, effort fades from the process. What once felt like discipline now feels like orientation. You no longer prepare yourself to be respected. You simply arrive as you are. Others feel this immediately, not as distance, not as superiority, as steadiness. Conversations organize themselves. Boundaries clarify without confrontation. Disagreements find their limit earlier. Nothing is imposed, nothing is withheld. This is how the Confucian path completes itself, not with achievement, but with sufficiency. At this stage, time becomes the teacher, not through urgency, through accumulation. Days pass, situations repeat. People observe more than they comment. What you do under pressure begins to matter more than what you say in moments of ease. Reputation forms here, not as something curated, but as something remembered. Others recall how you stood when things were uncertain, how you did not rush to protect yourself, how you allowed silence to do its work. This is how respect survives time. Words fade quickly, conduct does not. Years later, people may forget your arguments, your positions, your explanations. They remember steadiness, they remember fairness, they remember restraint that did not harden into distance. This is the Confucian idea of legacy. Not achievement recorded, but character was recognized. The path forward remains simple. Return to self-command before responding. Let conduct speak before language appears. Allow time to do what persuasion never can. Nothing needs to be concluded. No final gesture is required. Respect continues where alignment is maintained. And when speech finally arrives, it arrives complete, already supported by everything that did not need to be said. From here, the path does not branch. It narrows, not into limitation, but into clarity. Fewer explanations are needed. Fewer reactions are required. Fewer words carry more weight. Life continues to present noise. People continue to test boundaries. Situations continue to demand response, yet the response remains the same. Stand as you stand. Listen fully. Speak only when alignment has settled. Nothing is held up as an example. Nothing is announced as principle. The way you move becomes the teaching. And over time, that way speaks louder than any argument ever could. The Confucian path ends here, not with silence, but with a presence that no longer needs to be named. What remains is return. Return to posture when tension appears. Return to restraint when impulse rises. Return to alignment when words gather too quickly. These returns are quiet. They leave no trace, yet they shape everything that follows. Over time, effort fades from the process. What once required attention now happens on its own. You notice less urgency to respond, less need to clarify, less concern with how silence is interpreted, not through indifference, but through confidence that does not need reinforcement. The world continues to move. You continue to participate. The difference is subtle. You are no longer pulled forward by reaction. You are no longer pushed into speech. You are no longer measuring yourself against the room. Respect stays where alignment stays. And alignment, once familiar, no longer feels like a discipline. It feels like standing on solid ground while everything else moves around you.